I got flown out by Bethesda to try out the game they published, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, developed by Machine Games. I've got thoughts. I would consider myself to be a pretty good fan of Indiana Jones. I love Raiders. I mean, it's considered to be one of the best movies of all time. I like Temple of Doom. And you know what? I'm not ashamed. I kind of liken it to Return of the Jedi, which I know, Return of the Jedi is a far better movie, but still, it's kind of like it's the lesser of the trilogy. And I feel like depending on when you were born, it might dictate how much you like the movie. I feel like Temple of Doom is fun, right? And then you got The Last Crusade, which I really think rivals Raiders in some aspects. A lot of aspects, really. I think Sean Connery and Indiana Jones's, or Harrison Ford's back and forth is just so good. And then you got the fourth movie. What can I say about the fourth movie? I didn't like it. A lot of people didn't like it. I think Shia LaBeouf was a bad choice to play Indiana Jones's kid. Just not good. And you might be upset to hear, but I haven't seen the fifth movie. And you guys in the comments will have to let me know how it is. Because I guess in a funny way, it's like I'm shielding myself from being disappointed if I don't watch it, even though it's free on Disney Plus. So why wouldn't I? I have no doubt the fifth one's better than the fourth one, but I've been hurt before.
Careful, I've been hurt before.
And then there's the two Indiana Jones games I have played. Funny enough, Temple of Doom for the NES, which I owned when I was a very small child. I never beat. I think I replayed the first like 2 or 3 levels over and over again because small child, very dumb. And then you had the Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. I'm trying to go off memory here. That came out in 2003 for the Xbox and PS2, which again, I didn't beat when it came out. And my one memory from that game is the giant alligator that you had to swim around, which was super unfair. I know like it wasn't just me either because a lot of my friends were saying the same thing. Please let me know also in the comments if you remember that. And if you struggled with that. A lot of memories with Indiana Jones. How does this stack up to those memories? Why didn't you guys tell me I had some stuff on my shirt? You waited two something minutes in to tell me I had some schmutz on my shirt. Probably for my 1-year-old son, who's clearly out to get me. So let's start with the basics. We're all playing on PC. I assume with 4090s, whatever the latest thing is. I'm not really super great with computers, as it were. I should mention also we had about, I want to say like 2.5 to 3 hours to play. So to my knowledge, the graphics were maxed out. I was playing on normal difficulty. Graphically speaking, the game looked good, you know? It's always hard for me to define that, but I would say like a 8.5 out of 10 because I know 0.5s irritate people. Nothing really stood out as far as being bad. The lighting was great. None of the textures looked bad. Well, okay. I found one piece of grass that was floating. Character models in-game looked good. Cutscenes looked fabulous, really. Now, when it comes to bugs and frame rate droppage, I'm not gonna harp on them too much because they'll let us know ahead of time that it would be an issue because it's, you know, an earlier build. I definitely noticed though, because we experienced essentially 3 levels. Opening scene where you're pretty much going down a couple of hallways. A second linear map that has different pathings. Think almost similar to like a Call of Duty multiplayer map, right? And then the third map that was semi-open world. I noticed that any kind of issue I had outside of cutscenes was in the semi-open world, as far as a little bit of things here and there, very minute little things, any sort of frame rate, any sort of bugs. But to be clear, like they didn't have to show us that area. They were very proud of what they had. So I don't, like I said, nothing that I saw was worth being like, oh, this is concerning. And then in regard to the cutscenes, it was weirdly just mainly the opening cutscenes. And then after that, it cleaned up very, very nicely. No issues after that beginning level. So let's next go into the story and the voice acting. Story-wise, it's kind of run-of-the-mill, at least from the little bit I experienced. They didn't obviously give us too many story beats. Indiana Jones goes after a guy that stole something valuable. I assume it could lead to the end of the world. As I stated, they didn't leave me with too much. The conversations that were had between the various characters was interesting. There's also a nod to someone from the movies, which I won't get into, but it definitely tries to address some questions that were left off with said character. I really hope they go in on that. I really hope that's just not, you know, and then drop it and never address it again. The voice acting was great. We all know at this point that Troy Baker is playing Dr. Jones, and given that I was given such a big sample size, it took me a little bit to get used to it not just sounding like Troy Baker to me, because I've played so many games with Troy Baker. But after that brief adjustment period, you start buying into it, baby. He really becomes Indiana Jones, which is notable because the last taste of voice acting of Indiana Jones I've got was the previously mentioned Emperor's Tomb that came out on the Xbox and PS2 I mentioned beforehand. It's like the voice actor that voiced Dr. Jones did a good impression, but his overall voice acting chops left a lot to be desired.
The first emperor of China. He built the Great Wall and established a dynastic government that lasted for centuries. His reign lasted from 255 BC.
While I feel like Troy Baker isn't doing an Indiana Jones impression, he's being Indiana Jones. So I think there's gonna be parts where you don't hear it necessarily, that, oh, this is Harrison Ford all the time, but I think it's a good choice with the direction they went. And from there, all the voice acting I heard, I had zero complaints. I'm the kind of guy where if random Joe walking down the street has a terrible voice actor, I'm pointing out.
I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night. Wait a minute, let me do that one again.
But really, everyone was strong, you know? I want to say this real quick. If you're one of the people that was kind of concerned about the entire game being first person, I was very pleased that there are certain parts where you go into third person, such as when you swing from place to place with your whip, when you're climbing stuff. And it happened enough for me where I thought it paced things very, very well. Now let me get into some stuff that's not so good, because I've said a lot of good stuff, but I have complaints, don't worry. I mentioned previously the semi-open world map, and to my knowledge, there's not gonna be any vehicles. If there are, they're doing a great job hiding it. So of course, you've got to sprint from point A to point B to point C to point A. And I understand you have to have him be an average Joe as far as the speed he's running. But even then, it's a video game and the sprinting is way too slow. And I'm not asking for it to increase too much. It's just they have to meet me halfway. It makes getting to each point on this semi-open world map very exhausting. I found myself holding down the sprint with one hand and kind of like zoning out almost in a sense, which should not be happening at all, right? So and I think that the reason why they didn't send me any B-roll of that is because I think they're already addressing it. They gotta be, right? I'll take it a step further. All I could think of the entire time was this is how old man Harrison Ford runs. Now let's talk about the melee combat. I went in thinking it wasn't gonna be that great. I've got a habit of not watching trailers because I don't want things spoiled for me, even the smallest of things. And the last thing I saw about the game, and Bethesda, if you hear this, please don't get mad. The last thing I saw was the Game Awards, where it had the funny German guy going ha 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 ha. So I really haven't seen gameplay, but I gotta say, man, the melee combat was so satisfying. Point out how I'm only addressing the melee combat for now being satisfying, but we'll go in more on that later. It's just as far as going fisticuffs, as far as parrying goes, all the sound effects sound great. Everything feels like you're actually punching things. Don't get me started on the whip being used to disarm and whatever have you. And I'm so pleased. You can pick up weapons too. And not just like just random stuff. Shovels, lamps. I don't want to go too far into everything because there's just, I want you guys to discover things for yourselves. I will say there was one household item that I used to take down an enemy, and I could feel the eyes at the event staring at me because I was laughing so hard. This could end up being a nothing burger, but my next complaint I have, out of the 4 puzzles I did, and then I'm also going to include one I watched someone do.
Puzzling. I am puzzling. Looks good to me.
2 or 3 of them were the exact same thing. Now, I'm relatively certain that all that was shown to us was early game, and at best, maybe that 3rd one was mid game, possibly. So there's a really good chance, if it is all early game, that they were just giving us a little sample size as far as the puzzles go. They could get a lot more varied. It's just something that I couldn't get out of my brain. So again, this could be nothing, but just something for you guys and myself to keep in mind. I know I still haven't talked about the gunplay. I promise we're getting there. I wanted to save that for last because I got a lot to say. So how's the stealth play then? It's fine. I feel like it's very run-of-the-mill. It works. Again, playing on normal difficulty, I can't say how hardcore parkour it gets. Parkour! On those harder difficulties. I would say that the AI overall was decently smart. There were a couple times where they definitely should have noticed me, but again, I feel like it is 1 part the industry standard and 2 parts playing on normal difficulty. Potentially. You, of course, can throw bottles to distract enemies, and getting alerted by an enemy if you mess up alerts very nearby enemies as well. Though I will mention, I wish I could remember the exact quote, but the dev that spoke with us really made it seem like stealthing was going to be a very important thing. However, very rarely did I feel like I needed a stealth. It was more so me trying it out in order to be able to talk about it with you guys. Having this be a play your way thing could definitely be a good thing. I just really wish I had had a chance to start over that semi-open world map on a harder difficulty to kind of test it out, but I just didn't have time. You can't just routinely shoot your way out of situations. If you let one bullet go, at least from what I experienced, I had like 10 enemies swarm on me. And that was on the linear portion. I didn't really get much of a chance outside of this like enemy base to try that. And of course the enemy base, probably worse. And as far as your pistol, you're not gonna have a lot of ammo on you anyway. So it ends up being much more of a just in case of emergency type thing. So I suppose kind of works really well with making you feel like Indiana Jones. With all that being said, this is where my biggest complaint of my experience came. I did not like the gunplay. I really did not. So first off, a big problem I had was not being able to aim down sights. Instead, you just zoom in a little bit from your the right hand that he's using his pistol, and of course other weapons as well, rifle, machine gun. And I think I get what they were trying to go for. Some of the fellow creators that were there with me were trying to make the point that you want it to still illustrate that point of him being an average Joe, but I feel like plenty of people are capable of aiming down sights, maybe not hitting very well, but at least attempting. People watch movies and TV, but I feel like that's more so something I personally dislike, not a bad thing, something I wish was different, but I can deal with. However, I feel like they got to work on the bullet sponginess of the enemies. I know at one point I had a machine gun and I dumped what felt like an entire clip to me into a big guy, and it barely took him down. In even smaller enemies, I feel like took 1 or 2 too many shots. Luckily, again, something that could be adjusted. But I feel like my biggest issue I had, a lot of enemies will have guns on them. However, they'll only use their guns if you use your guns, which paints a funny picture in your head that the enemy is constantly being told by their higher ups that a gentleman's agreement is in session.
I've got yourself a deal. Robin, will you do the honors?
A gentleman's agreement.
Huzzah!
To not use the guns? Which, hey, we all know that Nazis were very understanding, so I guess that makes sense. It just sort of brought down my experience because I don't know how you change that. It was to the point where my entire strategy was based on how many of them have guns? Instead of, oh, that guy has a gun, I need to eliminate him right away. Otherwise, as soon as he sees me, he will try to shoot me. So even if you fix all those issues somehow, I just didn't like how the guns felt, which again, that comes down to drastically personal preference. Just because I don't think they feel good doesn't mean you guys will, right? My hope is they somehow drastically, magically change everything I want them to change, which I know is not realistic. So moreover, I'm hoping that I enjoy the melee combat so much and the story and the voice acting to where, gunplay, I don't mind it. It's fine. It's a lesser part, but that's okay. So with all that being said, I'm excited. There's some things I'm not as excited about as I was just saying, but there's a lot I'm very excited for. I think I give the overall experience as far as me playing goes 8 out of 10. It's so hard to grade a preview, right? But thank you very much to Bethesda for flying me out. That's the first time anything like that has ever happened to me. First time I've ever been as far west as Kansas. There's also a lot I didn't have time to get to do to include in this, including some IRL vlog type stuff during my trip. So if people show interest, I might do that. But overall, this is my first time doing anything like this. I have very little experience editing. I don't really do long form content, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time and effort into this, so hopefully it was decent. Hopefully you'll want to subscribe, at least comment and ask me some questions about my experience. Hit the like button for me. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.